Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Gesualdo, consisting of Carlo Gesualdo's Psalms and Madrigals 5 to 6, which I saw at the Opera Stabile at the Staatsoper Hamburg. The conductor and on the lute was Johannes Gontarski. The production and sets were done by Calixto Bieto. The costumes were done by Rebecca Zimlich. The lights were handled by Michael Bauer. The dramaturgy was handled by Johannes Blum. On the viol de gamba was Frauke Hess. On the organ were Alexander Bülow and David Clark, and the soloists were sopranos Tanya Aspelmeier and Gabriele Rosmanit, mezzo-soprano who was billed as a contralto, Amelia Saadia, tenor Sergei Ababkin, baritones Victor Ruth and Zach Karaiti, and basso Felix Schwanke along with actor Kai Teschner. Now before I get on to the main review, a few words about who the composer Carlo Gesualdo was. Not only was Signore Gesualdo a very well-known Italian Renaissance composer who was also well-known for his madrigals, sacred music, and a lot of his other great pieces of musical work, but he was also a prince. And since he comes from nobility, he was not only trained in music, but also in the arts, sciences, philosophy, human rights, law, and a lot of other subjects that the nobility managed to get themselves involved in. He was not only well known for his musical work, but he was also quite infamous for one piece of controversy, and that was the fact that he killed off his wife and her lover. Some sources and some legends say that Gesualdo was possessed by demons. And aside from that act, he was also quite infamous for leading a not so ideal way of life, which mainly involves a lot of debauchery and a lot of pretty bad behavior. But despite those controversies that Signore Gesualdo had, his musical pieces, mostly found in his sacred works and madrigals, were pretty much well known throughout the world of music. I basically came into Gesualdo without any knowledge of who Carlo Gesualdo was. I only heard him by name, and when I heard the lecture given to one of the gentlemen from the Staatsoper Hamburg, I was really interested of who he was and his many ties to other great composers like Claudio Monteverdi and Thomas Tallis. And for someone who only knew Carlo Gesualdo by name, I was completely interested as to what was going to happen. And speaking of the main event itself, I definitely have to say that Calixto Bieto definitely knocked it out of the park, even though there are some people that might seem a little bit indifferent or may not care too much about his visions. But I thought he did a very good job in terms of how he was going to get his message across. The first part started off really solemnly with a baritone singing his solo, and then when we lead onto the Greek chorus, we even see a naked man on stage. The naked man basically symbolizes human life and human frailty, basically human beings. And the Greek chorus represents a lot of things that human beings experience, like life, birth, fate, fighting, destruction, anger, sadness, loneliness, strife, love, passion, lust, and a lot of other earthly things that human beings go through. One soloist changes from her usual white shirt, black pants attire into a purple dress, which she's supposed to represent human desires for someone else. And we even get to see those human factors play off of each other quite well in terms of how the chorus members managed to not only strip themselves off of their usual attire, but also in terms of the women's parts. They dress up in different pieces of clothing to represent the fact that they are also human and have also earthly desires. And the overall execution from this particular production was pulled off quite well. And there are times that silence was used with a great effect. And sometimes it's quite deadly and terrifying that sometimes the silence starts to feel and sound like screams, which heightens the overall creepiness, but also heightens that unsettling nature that this piece manages to give. And it also reflects Carlo Gesualdo's unsettling nature of who he was as a person, especially what happened to his wife and her lover. So overall, both the sacred elements found in Gesualdo's music and the big scary reality that Gesualdo had to face with in terms of his daily life and the controversies that surrounded him really did come into play with such a simple package, but it was delivered in a way that was quite powerful and quite the emotional trip, even though it took 1 hour. Now we get to the singers, starting off with the sopranos Tanya Aspelmayer and Gabriele Rosmanit. Let's start off with Tanya Aspelmayer. I really love her light lyric soprano voice. To me, it's a voice that's very ideal for a lot of the Baroque works and a lot of works composed by Mozart, Gluck, and Handel. It is a very supple, clean sounding, and gorgeous voice, and she has a very sweet and gorgeous stage presence. And I especially love the few moments of cattiness that Miss Aspelmayer had, especially with the main actor, as she was able to show her acting chops really, really well. I have followed the career of Madame Gabriele Rosmanit for quite some time. She has been a singer I've been very familiar with, mostly hearing her in a lot of the light lyric soprano roles of Pamina from The Magic Flute, Micaela from Carmen, and even character parts like Marianne Leitmetzerin from Rosenkavalier and Berta from Il Barbiere di Siviglia. She's mainly well known for her supple, silvery, light lyric soprano voice, which has made her so well known in roles like Pamina, Zerlina, Despina, Susana, and a lot of these other girlish parts, and even the roles of Melisande from Peleas et Melisande and Micaela from Carmen. And wow, does she have one of the most supple voices I have ever heard. I really love her voice. It's gorgeous. It's silvery. It has that lush quality that is so wonderful to listen to, and she shows no signs of vocal tiredness whatsoever. For someone who is currently in her 60s, she has a voice which maintains its lush quality. It is fresh, it's young and clean, and it has a very beautiful overall quality. And her stage presence was very charming. Amelia Saadia was a very new name for me. Rightfully so, as she's still quite young, but she shows a lot of promise. She's in her mid to late 20s, but just by witnessing her, whether it be her voice or whether it be her overall stage mannerisms, I can tell this mezzo-soprano has a very bright future ahead of her. She has a very finely tuned voice, which is quite gorgeous to listen to. It's well focused, it's young and fresh and clean, and it's quite rich in certain registers, especially the lower register, which sounds quite rich for someone who's still quite young. I would really love to see a lot more of this fine young mezzo-soprano. Sergei Ababkin has a handsome countenance on stage. Even though there were parts that he didn't really sing, one can tell that he has a face full of charisma, charm, and he's quite handsome to look at. But more than anything, his tenor voice was light and breezy, and he just has a very handsome stage presence. Victor Rudd was the one who started off the evening, and he was an absolute star in my opinion. I basically not only knew him and Madame Rosmanith through their careers, and not only through their names, but I've also followed them for quite some time. And from what I can tell from Mr. Wood, he has been getting better and better. His voice has that youthful quality, and he himself is quite youthful. I presume he's in his mid to late 20s, probably approaching 30, but I could definitely tell that this is a young baritone with a handsome future, and I can definitely sense a great international career because he has a lot of potential, but more than anything, his handsome stage presence and his equally handsome voice were just a great blend. I especially love the fight scene that he had with Felix Schwanke, and they had excellent chemistry as sort of rivals, and you could definitely feel the energy that these two gave. I almost expected Victor Ruth to snap off Felix Schwanke's neck in a pretty brutal fight scene. That would have been kind of cool, but kind of brutal. But not to mince words here, I definitely love their chemistry. And I'll definitely talk about Mr. Schwanke much later after I talk about Zach Cariti, who also has a very fine baritone voice. And it kind of sounds a little bit like a tenor in certain registers, especially some of the middle and higher notes. He has a very homogeneous voice and has an equally handsome stage presence, and he's very youthful on stage. And speaking of Felix Schwanke, he was also a very fine singer. He has a handsomely tuned bass baritone voice, and he was also young and fresh on stage. So overall, the singers were at their tip-top form for the evening, and they sounded magnificently. And special kudos also has to go to the actor, Kai Peshna, for really doing an amazing job in just really pouring himself out with giving off the necessary emotions of this particularly tortured man. And you could definitely feel it in his performance. I almost felt like he was almost about to scream when he was in pain. And the experience that I had with this particular actor was so visceral. And it was just a pretty rewarding experience just watching this gentleman do what he has to do on stage. And the conducting and the lute playing done by Maestro Johannes Gontarski was really well done, especially the playing done by Frauke Hess, Alexander Bülov, and David Clark. So overall, Gesualdo, in terms of its production, singers, music, and conducting, was an excellent experience. All the singers, the people behind the production, and even the musicians pulled all the stops to make this experience so worthwhile. And for those of you who have seen this production, what did you think of it? Was there a singer who stood out to you so much? Did you really like this particular production done by Senor Bieto? Or did you feel like the experience for you was kind of draining? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. I'm sorry if I had to really push this Waltraud Meyer Lieder album review a little bit back and back and back. But let's just say that real life has kind of taken over. But do expect a review of that tomorrow. So until then, good night, everybody.